Do you have questions?
Hi, Francis. I have an avocado in my hand, which I want to ask you about. I often carry fruit around with me, if you believe it or not. I spend a lot of my time contemplating the true nature of experience. And something you said in one of your talks, I actually am pretty new to you, but you said, when you get close to the truth of what you are, this becomes a beautiful meadow to play on. And that's why I'm here. I want to experience that. And last night you said something about the freedom of a bee going from flower to flower. That's really what I want. I thought for many years that I wanted enlightenment, but I see that's just a label. And my first teacher said to me 4 or 5 years ago, the most important thing is to figure out what's the most important thing. And it took me a long time to...
That's very good.
Yeah.
I may reuse that one.
Well, it took me a long time to see clearly what he meant by that. And admittedly, I couldn't... I knew he was pointing to something other than enlightenment, but I couldn't figure it out. But I think I have figured it out. It's that freedom that I really want. And I think that's why I spend so much time contemplating the true nature of reality, because if I could see that this person or this body has the same reality as the character in last night's dream, I can't imagine what kind of freedom I would have from seeing that clearly. And if you'll indulge me for 2 minutes, I just want to share a dream I had last night before I get to my question about the avocado. I had such a vivid dream. It was about, I was kissing this person I didn't want to kiss. And, the thoughts and...
What?
Pardon?
What was the last word?
I said...
The thought?
The thoughts running through my head, which was, why am I kissing this person I don't want to kiss? The feelings of, this is a very uncomfortable experience. The sensation of one kiss in particular was as real as any kiss I've ever had in my life. And then, the vividness of the room I was in, the single bed in the room. And it was as real as anything I've ever experienced in the waking state. And, when I awoke from the dream, it was, I wanted to really learn from that experience, which was, it felt like it was taking place in time and space. It turned out not to be. It felt like the person was real. That person turned out, not to be. And everything was made of the same stuff. So when I awoke, there was no question what its reality was. I don't even need to put a name on it. You can call it mind or consciousness or whatever. It doesn't matter. It was clearly what I could see what its reality was or what its reality wasn't. And the knowing of that experience wasn't taking place in time and space. And this is kind of more of an affirmation, can I apply everything I just said to this situation right here, where everything I'm seeing is made of the same stuff, the container, if you will, is not actually, it appears to be taking place in time and space. It's not. The knowing of this experience, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations are actually taking place not in time and space, but in dimensionless consciousness. And that this person that appears to be sitting here in a room doesn't even really exist. It's borrowing its existence, if you will, from the what really is real, which would, as you said, the one reality, consciousness. I had to say that in front of you, and that's the indulgent part. If there's anything I got wrong or you'd like to kind of clarify.
What about the avocado?
That's next. And I tried to ask, I'm going to do a better job. I tried to ask Rupert this question, but he just gave me the Mary and Jane story again. And so if I think about the image of an avocado, or even, actually, I had 2 dreams that night. I dreamt about avocados, and there was a bunch of avocados that I was trying to salvage. They were used, and I thought, well, maybe I can make something of these avocados. So when I think of the avocado I have in my hand, you know, I know I know by touching and you know, tasting, perhaps you know, smelling, but those are all sense perceptions of the mind. And if I break down those sense perceptions, there's nothing but knowing, you know, and therefore it has the same reality of the image of an avocado in my mind. It's no more real, or the dream of the avocado really has no more reality to it than the avocado I'm holding in my hand. But here's where I get to my question about the avocado. There are implications if I don't eat avocados, like assuming avocado was the only food available, and I didn't eat any avocados. There would be implications, and I just want to apply a couple of other really quick things. If I close my eyes, I have no perception of this room, but at the same time, my rational mind will say, yes, but isn't it not keeping the rain off, you know, off your head? And then I think about, you know, matter is just a way of seeing, but we, as a society, we seem to be manipulating matter. You know, that it doesn't really exist. And maybe this isn't important for me to know these questions, you know, to get to my true goal of freedom. But my rational mind, when I see a car, or I see the guy fixing my toaster oven, I'm going, well, what's really happening here? You know, or my dishwasher breaks down, you know, what actually is happening there? You know, and I tried to ask this question before, and so that's where I'm at. It's just every now and then when I'm walking in nature, I do a pretty good job of sinking into the true nature of experience. I think when I'm walking, you know, I can see the consciousness isn't moving and things like that, or what's the reality of the tree. But then when I start walking past a bunch of cars, the rational mind will go, well, what is it? What is that anyway? You know? Because if we chop down too many trees, there's nothing we can do as the dream character to affect consciousness. Consciousness is indestructible, but you know, by chopping down too many trees, there's implications. We're destroying the dream. And I just wonder if you could kind of, you know, say something to me, and that's, I'll stop talking. Thank you.
The mistake, perhaps, we make in this non-duality business, and a mistake which is a logical or mistake made by even some teachers, even some famous teachers, is to put on the same level the night dream and the waking dream. So, in a sense, it is true in reference to the absolute reality, because the absolute reality of the night dream and the absolute reality of the waking dream is the same, right? Consciousness. But it doesn't mean that the night dream and the waking dream in relation to one another are on the same level of reality. because there are relative levels of reality, and there is absolute reality. So, in reference to absolute reality, any other level of reality is an illusion, right? So, the night dream, in reference to the waking dream, is an illusion. The waking dream is the relative reality of the night dream. But, in reference to the absolute reality, both the waking dream and the night dreams are illusions. So then, the night dream is an illusion within an illusion, right? But an illusion within an illusion is still an illusion. You are following me? Because let me give you another example of an illusion within an illusion. You have a night dream, okay? You meet this person whom you have never met. And this person speaks to you about a dream they had. So the dream they had, it was an illusion within the illusion of the night dream, right? But with regard to your relative reality of the waking state, they are both illusion. Okay? Now, but they are different relative to each other. So what is the difference between then the night dream and the waking dream? And the major difference is that the waking dream is a universal dream, whereas the night dream is a personal dream. By personal, I mean it's the dream of a human mind. The waking dream is the dream of Vishnu's mind, right? It's a universal dreamer that dreams the waking dream. And within this waking dream, dreamed by the universal dreamer, there are personal dreams. So they are part of Vishnu's dream too, right? And they are made of Vishnu, right?
I'm not familiar with that word, but...
Vishnu is the god, Vishnu is the god that sustains the universe. And the story is that he is asleep on the big serpent, Ananta, and he's relaxed, and he dreams the world. So that's a universal dream. So the distinction, if you will, a difference, you see, is what we call the intersubjective agreement, is that we agree that that's a flower. You see, we agree that that's an orchid, etc. So it is the vividness of the intersubjective agreement that leads us to the understanding that this flower exists independently, and that's very important, exists independently from any human mind. Why? Why? Because if you leave the room, for the rest of us, the flower still has an existence. Therefore, it has an existence independently from your mind, right? But then, if we do the same experiment with each of us, one after the other, we can show in the same way that the flower has an existence independent from all the minds of the people here, you see? So that's very important. Otherwise, we fall into the trap of idealism. Idealism, it's all mind. But when we say it's all mind, it doesn't imply it's all human mind. You see, that's very important. It's not, it's all Vishnu's mind. Yes, it's all mind, but it's Vishnu's mind. It's something different. You see? So there is this confusion between our personal mind, and the night dreams are made of this personal mind, if you will, and this universal mind. So, because otherwise, then problems arise, like you say, well, this avocado is so vivid, it has such an existence, if I don't eat, there are consequences, you know. So there is also a different quality of this waking dream, is that it is consequential. In other words, the law of causation applies in a very strict manner, whereas in the dream, well, you say, oh, I'm hungry, if I don't eat the avocado, I die, and then next moment you are a butterfly doing something else, and you see what I mean? The night dream is not as consequential, it's not as rational as this dream, actually. So that's what I could say, but what is important is that to understand that there is still a possibility that it's all mind. In other words, that this flower has no existence independently from minds, but nevertheless it has an existence in consciousness. Consciousness makes the minds, right? So that's the mind-only theory has to come up always with a supermind. That's what happens with Bishop's Berkeley. So then the Superman was God's mind. That's what happens with Leibniz also, with this notion of monades. And there was, so always you have to come up with something, and this something, of course, is consciousness, eventually, or reality. There is an ultimate reality that we have to come down to. But then the moment we arrive at this conclusion, then it doesn't matter whether you call this universal reality mind, God, consciousness, universal mind, God, consciousness, or whatever. The only thing that matters, because those are just names, it's only a question of semantics. The only thing that matters is non-duality, that everything, there is only one reality, only one thing. And then everything is made out of it. Otherwise, we run always into this problem of the cross-section between, or of the intersection rather, between the physical world and the mind world. Where do they intersect? Because and that's a question that is carefully avoided by materialists. You see? When they say, okay, thoughts are made of brain. Well, where is the evidence? You see? I can see that the cake or the pudding is made of, the cake is made of flour, eggs, and sugar and butter, right? But do I see that mind is made of brain in the same way? You see? It's just a religion to believe that. There is no scientific evidence that shows that mind is made of brain. Why? Because in order to show that the cake is made of eggs, milk, flour, etc., you need to be present when the cake is being made. Like when my mother was making cakes, right? I was present. I could see that the mix of all of these ingredients put in the oven turned out to be a cake, right? In other words, there was a continuity, there was a connection between the ingredients and the cake and the final product. Where is the connection between mind and brain? You see? In order to say from experience that mind is made of brain, we need to establish this connection. We need to show it. It is nowhere to be seen. So the mind made of brain theory is just a religion. And so the question remains. Why does the question remain? Well, because we perceive the world, the physical world. So in order for this perception, the physical world is physical. It's flower. But our perception of it is subtle. It is a cake. Where do they intersect? Where is the connection? You see? And the connection obviously is they must, in order for them to connect, they must share a common reality. You see? And this common reality has to be the reality of our perceptions. And the reality of our perception, I call it consciousness. And then, therefore, for perception to be real, of a perception of the world, in order for this perception to be real, to be a legit perception, it has to be the reality of the world and the reality of whatever perceives have to be the same. And since I call consciousness a reality that perceives, it follows that the reality of the world is consciousness. But it doesn't follow from that consciousness is limited. On the contrary, when we understand that consciousness is all over the world, if it is the reality of the world. Therefore, it is not localized in the brain or in a human body. It's a long answer with food for thought.
May I just real quick, I did understand everything you said. I think I'll definitely digest it a bit, but my understanding, or at least how I conceptualize, my looking at the flower right there is, it's a sense perception, is a vibration, if you will, happening within consciousness. Is it even possible to even know what that is? That like the flower, or is it just it's an appearance and
through the mind, we have only access to our perception of the flower.
Right.
We don't have access to the flower. You're right. We only have access through the mind to the image in the mind of the flower. The image you have is different from the image I have. My flower is much bigger than yours because I'm closer.
And for my rational mind, if someone's fixing my dishwasher, what might be happening there? The repairman thinks he's fixing a dishwasher. What's another way of looking at it? Is there another way?
He's fixing the dishwasher.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
That's a koan.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to ask a question about the Vishnu story. Actually, two questions, because I'm not real familiar with that.
I have to ask the experts. Yeah.
Mythology. Does
have to ask the Brahmins.
Does he ever wake up? And what happens if he does?
I guess when he wakes up, he realizes I'm Shiva.
Well, I asked for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead with the second question anyway, stubborn that I am. So how do we know that the Russian doll expansion of the night dream and the waking dream and the Vishnu dream?
Where does the buck stop?
Yeah, how do we know that stops at Vishnu? How do we know it's only a 3-element series, and are there finer gradations?
Well, because the definition of consciousness is the final stop.
A truly mathematical answer, we define it that way.
But also a practical matter. Let's say you bought something on Amazon, right? So the goods transit through a plane, then it arrives at a depot, and it's loaded onto a truck. Then the truck arrives here, and then you are not there. And then someone signs for you and picks up some merchandise. But at the end, you are the owner of it, and you are the one who is using it. You are the final destination. You are the real owner of it. All the rest are intermediaries. So how do we know, and that's a very good question, how do we know that there is a final perceiver? Because we perceive. You see what I mean? We know it because we are it.
Okay.
Yeah?
Fair enough.
Right? The mic doesn't hear my sounds, it transmits it. The amplifier does, and the speaker don't. The air that vibrates doesn't hear my words. Even the ears don't hear. The ears don't hear. We hear through the ears. Even the brain doesn't hear. The brain is a servant that kind of organizes the data. He is our private secretary, organizes the data. Then when the private secretary gets a little old,
tell me about it. Thank you.
There's something that messes with my peace last period, and especially after meditation and yoga, it's more evident that there's something there. So I'm seeking some to bring a more wiser, awakened perspective to some human dynamics. So I think last year I asked you about that I was experiencing guilt in connection to perceiving that I hurt some people I cared for due to some unconscious patterns. And you told me that the universe did it, through this. Nobody did it, the universe did it, and let it go. So that helped. But the same theme comes up. So again, I sense that due to some patterns or something, that I know they're not personal, and somehow created tension or suffering in another person. And another piece is that I've been playing successfully with this understanding that to see the being in others, not to see the body or the person, and that they are me. So this is awesome. I'm grateful for that. So I bring this too, that this person that seemingly I hurt, it's me. And also, I know that I don't have guilt necessarily, or that, oh man, I fucked up. I'm sorry, the language. But there's something unresolved somehow. And there's nothing I can do externally with that person.
Well, but it ties to this belief that you do things as a separate person. You have to realize as a separate person, your total lack of freedom and your total impotence, if you will. You have to understand that we are not moving as a person, we are being moved. And we are not thinking. The universe creates thoughts, just as it creates waves or just as it creates the weather. So the sense of guilt is always related to this belief to be someone who does things. But to do things, we have to decide to do them. And the decision comes as a thought. And this thought, we don't choose it. The universe makes it for us. So the universe makes all the choices. And you will see, at some point, you don't feel guilty any longer. And at the same time, you cannot judge. You see, you cannot judge. You can say, and people who judge, you feel, oh, there is such ignorance there. For instance, you see the political scene, the mess in politics, throughout the world. You see the mess. But at the same time, you understand, nobody is guilty. It's just the universe thing. You don't see any more people. So the good news is that as you don't see the guilt in you, you don't see the guilt in others. You see.
I don't feel now guilt anymore, but it's a sense of that it's hard to live it like that. Somehow as if...
Well, then do your best to fix whatever can be fixed. But there again, the success of it is not in your hands as a person. You have to understand that as a body-mind, all you can do is to be an instrument, a servant of the Absolute as a body-mind. But there is no guarantee of success. That's the bad news. But the good news is that there is no obligation of success. It's like when you go to the doctor, there is no guarantee of success, but there is no obligation from the part of the doctor. You can say, oh, I pay you if I heal. It doesn't work that way. There wouldn't be too many doctors. They are not that successful.
I guess at the end of the day, I have some cocktail of sensations in my chest. I can put words like loss or sadness or regret.
Martini.
What? Martini, yeah. It's a sad cocktail. Also, I guess I can see it doesn't help that this person, although it's pretty wise, now is some blame and judgment. Yeah. So I guess I'm internalizing. I let it stick, So then
people push our buttons. That's interesting. It's interesting to observe that. But the moment we understand, if you have understood that you're not in charge of your thoughts, that once we have had this insight, the sense of guilt is going to disappear at some point. Because it's a deadly virus for the sense of guilt. The understanding that we don't have the freedom to choose our decisions or our thoughts as a separate individual. That our thoughts come from the universe, they are the way the universe works. And in this moment, it's the same. It's the same always. I'm not choosing my words, but we never choose them. We believe we do, you see. But something happens when we know we are not choosing them, because they are free. It's real free speech then.
Thank you.
Hi, Francis. So I want to extend this dream into a deep sleep experience where I've been struggling for a while. We all know the mind, the intellect, the ego, everything is fast asleep in deep sleep. And consciousness being a different order of reality. There is still a universal experience every morning when people wake up from that deep sleep. I slept good. I slept like a log. Who is there to recollect that experience if the mind is fast asleep and the consciousness is completely of different order of reality? There has to be someone who is enabling us to give us that feeling that I slept good.
Yes, it's a peace. But this peace is not an object. And because it is an object, it is not something which is recordable in memory. That's the bad news, it cannot be recorded. So, but because this peace never disappears, it is still present during the waking state. That's why this transition between the sleep and waking state is an opportunity for meditation, because the perfume of presence is still more intense in these moments. But deep sleep itself, deep sleep, the human deep sleep, is distinct from the experience of pure consciousness. That's why deep sleep is the third state. Pure consciousness is the fourth state. The first state being waking, second state dreaming, third state deep sleep, the bindu, right? And then the silence. And silence meaning nirvikalpa, absence of objects. Absence of vikalpas, right? So that, but because during this period of the night, or these episodes of deep sleep, the perceptions that remain are completely disorganized. The recording device also is idle, and or even switched off. So there is nothing objective we remembered about this moment. And the texture of the perception is very loose, so that the piece of the background shines through this loose texture. And but also there is something to be said about, upon waking up, this feeling, oh, I slept well. Well, sometimes you have the feeling I didn't sleep well. That is based on the current condition of the body that we observe. A body that has not slept well is a kind of rebellious and is like someone who has a grudge on you. Right? So it doesn't. So this feeling, and on the opposite, a body which has slept well, which is rested, is telling you, "Thank you. I'm satisfied. I'm content." That is not based upon a memory from what happened during the night, but it's an observation based on the current condition of the body. But there is something, yes, nevertheless, about the peace of the deep sleep, and because the mind goes through a cleansing process through the first period of the night, and then you see that if you meditate a lot, at some point your sleep becomes shorter, and you wake up after 4 or 5 hours. And because it takes less time to process the remains of the day, if you will. And then the second part, even if there are dreams, they are different. They are open dreams. They are not dreams coming from the memory from the past, but they are more connected to other realms. They are intuitive dreams, if you will. My teacher used to say, "I don't dream." And there was this friend was living with us, and he enters his room, and he was asleep. My teacher was asleep, and he was saying, "How beautiful, how beautiful."
Thank you.
Hey, Francis. I did forget what I was going to ask, but
Welcome to the club.
something will come short. Well, one thing I would like to say, and this may seem very, and it's been going on for a while now since I've been coming here. And for lack of a better way of saying it, if I feel not stuck, for example, somewhere, sure enough, that's what you end up talking about. Or somebody will ask a question very specifically on point, and it keeps happening. At first, I thought it was kind of circumstantial, but it keeps happening over and over and over. Kind of like, the Twilight Zone, really.
I know.
But now for a question. Yesterday, you mentioned, you pointed to the truth, that which you are certain of, or words to that effect. And you commented a little bit about we know too much and the problem with knowing. And when I think about knowing, for example, to know yourself, even in a relative, you go to bookstores, 1,000 books, self-help, how to improve yourself, all focused on the psychology self, the knowable self. And that certainly has its place, no question about it. But then maybe through grace, there's an understanding where you you recognize or understand something deeper, an unknowable self. And then you hear a sage come along, inquire, who am I, or what am I, more specifically, or the Greeks, the currency, know thyself, to enter the temple.
Yeah.
They're certainly not talking about the self-improvement aspect of it. But you don't know that until you kind of know it, because there's kind of an impulse to improve oneself. Then you get to some understanding where, wow, I guess the problem where I get in trouble is when there's an answer. Okay, to know yourself and seek self-improvement makes perfect sense on a relative perspective, but in terms of the unknowable self, the unborn, so forth, you can't go there.
In a sense, you can go there, but not with the mind. That's why it's called negative knowledge, because how can we say that consciousness is not red, for instance?
Right.
Huh?
Right.
So, or that consciousness is not an object, or that consciousness is not a thought, for instance, because a thought doesn't think. How do we know that? Perhaps you know it because Francis has said that, but then it becomes a religion, a belief. But it's different when we know it from experience. Yes. It must be because we have the experience of consciousness that enables you, that authorizes us, empowers us to say, no, consciousness, a thought doesn't think, therefore consciousness is not a thought.
So it just gets back to getting rid of the old toolbox, thought, because it's not going to.
Regarding self-improvement, yes, I mean, there are things that when you are interested in the truth, during the sadhana, it's interesting. At some point, the specific qualities of the body-mind get revealed. And also, some qualities may be still a little dirty with ignorance.
Yeah.
You see, so it's good to cleanse them. For instance, a very good exercise is to assume that we have the shortcomings that we believe not to have. It's very important. You see? If we believe to be intelligent, so that's we have to be. If we believe to be loving, if we believe to be generous, we have to be very careful about that. And because then it enables us to do this final cleansing around some qualities that, on the other hand, we will discover, yes, we will discover that there are also qualities that belong to this human entity that, as a result of our love for the truth, shine, right? So, but it's important in order for them to shine, to make them shine, to cleanse them.
To cleanse them.
So a good exercise is assume that the shortcomings that you are certain not to have, assume that you have them, and look at it. It's just an exercise, and it's very interesting because because when you're a truth lover, you're not attached. You see,
yes.
and when you discover that you have a shortcoming that you believe not to have, instead of being disappointed, oh gee, I am stupid or I am whatever. You see, at least I know that's intelligence, you know. Yeah, I discovered that, you know. I thought I was this funny guy. I am boring everybody with my jokes, you know.
I like the word discovery better than knowing. I like the word discovery. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question about when, working with what am I, and having, getting closer to consciousness, things getting more real, and then, repetitive thought patterns coming up, that seem to have, it's not even if the thought's exactly the same, but the motivation for the thought would be the same, like, wanting to look good or something like that. And so taking the insights or the experience and saying, oh, how can this be packaged up to, enhance my image in the world? Those kind of patterns that repeat. So when working with, is it best to return to the what am I question to try and relax into, is it kind of a steering oneself, or is it better to work with to work somehow with the material that's presenting itself repetitively?
Well, we have to work with the what am I question as long as this question arises. That's very simple, my answer. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If the question arises, work with it. If it doesn't arise, then don't.
Okay.
You will observe that at a certain point the question doesn't arise in the form of a question.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is still a sense of limitation or a sense of lack, which is on a different level that has to be dealt with. And that's this. It's an adventure, this discovery. Life is an adventure.
So that, the level of working with it, you just referred to.
You have to, I think it's good to work only on a need to work basis.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if the question arises, deal with it. If it doesn't arise, don't bring it up. If a problem arises, deal with it. If it doesn't arise, don't create one.
Okay. I don't think I'm creating problems.
No. Yeah. In other words, we should live our lives out of enthusiasm, out of interest.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So we are interested in understanding something about what sages have said or whatever, or we are interested in conducting experiments, but we conduct the experiments only if we are interested. Otherwise it becomes a dull practice which makes us more stupid.
Well, I'm genuinely interested in consciousness.
Of course.
And as I enjoy sitting in the morning and exploring what am I, what is my experience, and what is experience, and
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect.
But then these patterns, they repeat themselves over, or this kind of thinking.
What, the pattern of sitting in the morning and experiencing.
That and then the thinking about
This pattern is a good pattern. So because this pattern is not repetitive. Because you revisit the issue of what I am, but every time from a different angle. And at some point, the case will be settled and it won't come up any longer. But it has to find its natural ending.
Okay. So are you saying then that, noticing a pattern is to try and actually work with that directly, or to turn it into sensations? That's another thing I've thought.
Well, if we because the pattern about asking about question about the truth is a good pattern.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't come from ignorance.
Right.
It comes from love for the truth, actually. It arises out of interest. It's very different from repetitive patterns that involve fear and desire.
Right.
And these patterns, they hinge around the belief to be a separate person.
Right.
So the very simple way to get rid of them is to go to the very center of this pattern, to the hinge.
Okay.
You see? Because that's when this investigation that you conduct out of love, out of interest, in your spare time, so to speak, becomes fruitful. Because then you can apply your understanding when you are in this pattern running in circle around the belief to be a separate entity, because this belief, you have dealt with it.
Sorry?
This belief to be a separate entity, you have dealt with it in your investigation. Now you can apply the result of your investigation to this current pattern, and immediately it will drop.
Okay. That hasn't happened yet. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can try to drop it as an experiment, because you can then it's the experimental approach to the truth. The moment you have make a clear assessment that this pattern of fear and desire is fueled and exists only because of, is fueled by and exists only because of your belief to be a separate entity, you can say, okay, let's challenge this belief. And the way to challenge is to drop the pattern. You see what happens.
Okay.
Because already you have a doubt about being a separate entity, otherwise you wouldn't have investigated.
Yes, and when it's clear, there's times of clarity when it's clear that there's no separate entity. And when it's clear, it's clear.
Yeah, but once you have understood the true nature of Santa Claus, that there is no Santa Claus, it should be clear all the time that there is no Santa Claus.
Okay. So it's not as clear as I'd like to think, right? Okay. Right.
Then you, if it is not clear, but if you have a strong suspicion already that the true nature of Santa Claus is mom and dad, you can say, okay, let's check it out. So next time you go to Toys R Us with mom and dad to look at the toys in order to prepare your order for Santa Claus, and then you see dad moving away, discreetly going towards the cashiers. Follow him. See what is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. On this experiment, on dropping the person, on dropping the belief to be a separate identity, when it is caught sometimes, as it usually comes as thought, that's how it arises. So there is an attempt to drop the thought, which from what I understand is not the person.
No, but usually the thought is not going to remain as a thought. The thought is going to tell you, do something. And the way to drop is to tell the thought, up yours. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that kind of happens sometimes, where there is an internal...
That's the experiment, you see. You don't follow suit. You may feel bad, but you stick to it. You know, thought, no, I'm not going there, I'm not going there. And then you see the outcome of that.
So like when sometimes it feels really insistent, like a flow of thoughts, and then it's like, another thought says, like be quiet or shut up, like kind of like an internal, it's almost an internal frustration with that.
Yeah. It's very difficult to find the thought. In other words, not to try to have a thought. It's better to let the thought run, but when the thought is asking you to do something, you don't follow suit. Compare the thought to a sales speech by a used vacuum cleaner salesman who shows up at your doorsteps. You know? So you have the choice. Either, you tell the guy, you take your baseball bat that you have next to the door, you just hit the guy on to make him shut up. You see? Or you listen to the speech patiently, but when he asks you for your credit card, you say, sorry, I'm not interested.
Yes.
Chances are next time he's not going to come back.
Yes. What's most common in my case are just like random mental stories that aren't even real, or that don't even exist, but it is as if they just like play themselves, and then I recognize them, but then the recognition doesn't last long, and then they play themselves again.
Wait, but the first thing is to understand that you enjoy those.
I feel if I enjoy them, I wouldn't want to get rid of
them. It's like a game.
Then why would I want to get rid of them?
No, because the only problematic ones are the ones that relate about you being a separate person. So filter them out. In other words, you don't need to have an absolute prohibition of imagination. Just filter out the ones that come from ignorance, and then liberate your imagination.
It's just about 100% of them are about a person.
Yeah, but the problem is the person is not the ability you have to have a vivid imagination. It's a very good thing. So these abilities that we have, once we get rid of ignorance, you can apply it to other things, to artistic endeavors, etc.
Yes, so when you say, as an experiment, drop the belief, that's where I fault, because the assumption is that if I figured out a way to drop the belief, those things would not happen. Those stories just would go away. But I cannot, the belief isn't anything.
You have to drop the belief to be a separate person first, at least provisionally. In other words, to have a serious doubts about that. and then use it as a tool to change the direction of your imagination. You shouldn't be the censor of your imagination, but you should conduct experiments with regard of this part of your imagination that involves ignorance. That's all. For instance, you ask yourself, where did that come from? You know, I mean, you are in fear of something, you're running into circles to protect you from this or from that event, and to imagine what could happen, you know, no matter how unlikely it is. And then you say, well, where did that come from? You know, would that be there unless I would believe to be a separate person, you see? And then when it's very wild, it's easy to drop it.
So it's almost like just to remember the question is dropping it.
Yeah, let's imagine that in your imagination, all of a sudden you imagine that the planet is in great danger of extraterrestrial, you know, landing on it and destroying all of us, all of a sudden. You know?
Yeah.
And you run onto that, you know, how can I protect myself from this extraterrestrial? Should I buy some land in Patagonia? You know, and you go all of that. Yeah, but where do I get the money to buy the land, and etc. So you go, you keep going, and then you catch yourself red-handed. You say, and you say, well, it comes from fear. And then you come back to reason. How is it? How likely is it? You know, it's more likely that I'm going to get killed by some virus or by some car accident, and I drive every day without fear, than the extraterrestrial doing it for me. So then the entire thing drops, right?
Yes. So the picking up isn't as important. Like the picking up happens continuously. What's more important is the dropping of it.
Yeah, it's like people who have, what is it called? Afraid of being sick, you know, afraid of sickness. Mm-hmm. You know, they are running thoughts in there. So when they catch themselves red-handed doing that, you see, the first thing to say, okay, the body is going to die anyway, right? But what is the reality right now? You see, do I have this? Do I have cancer? Do I have that? Okay, let's check it out. You see, to be extremely matter of fact, and not to live in a constant imagination.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a little stuck with something you said earlier about how we don't control our lives, or we don't control our thoughts. And so I was like, why did I raise my hand? Who did that? You know, that kind of seemed a little strange. Today, during the meditation, you had you introduced the idea of these sounds being a different species of fish, and I assume thoughts are another species of fish.
Yes.
In that space. So we don't control our thoughts because we don't choose the fish in that?
Let's say thoughts, they are like atmospheric events, meteorological events. Mm-hmm. And we don't control them. We believe that we do. Now, it is true that we create our thoughts, but not as a separate entity, you see. This local controller of the thought, or this local creator of the thoughts, is the mistake we make. there is not a local creation of a thought. Let's say a thought occurs to you to go on a trip to South California. And I'm not talking about this trip. And you think, okay, it's my thought, it's my decision. But in fact, it's because it was foggy up in the Bay Area, and you were fed up having spent 8 months in the fog, in San Francisco. So I found a new Shropshire now.
That's nice, yeah.
You see, but in fact, the fog determines your decision much more than the alleged personal decider. You see, so let's see this human body mind as a biocomputer with all kinds of sensors, right? That gets all kinds of information, direct information through the sensors. In addition to that, it's connected to the internet. So it gets all kinds of information, right, through, in the form of digital information, whatever. And it runs a program, and there is a part of this program that the output of which is decisions, right? And then the decision output through robotic devices manipulates the arms, the legs, the tongue, right? And the attached speakers, right? and so, but this biocomputer, first of all, didn't create itself. And it is loaded with an adaptive software that constantly becomes smarter or more stupid, depending on, on the nature of the artificial intelligence basic program which is in it. And so, can we say that such a biocomputer decides?
It sounds very cause and effect.
Yes, it is the entire universe first, because it is the universe that created it, and also it's the kind of software that has been loaded onto it, and with the updates, right, of these softwares that are constantly loaded onto it, plus all the information, the data that comes, access to this worldwide database, and it is connected to the internet, right? So when a decision seems to emanate from this node, with the robotic arms, etc., in fact, the origin of it is the internet. Are you following me? Because all the information coming from it.
Yeah.
So could we say that the internet is localized?
No.
No, really, you see. So in fact, it's the internet that makes a decision, in a sense. So in this universe, and the way it is organized, it's kind of preposterous to think that there is a local decider.
And
there is the appearance of it. There is in the computer this possibility to conceive of itself as a local decider. Yes.
That's a program. That's a loop. But what about consciousness? How does that fit in?
Consciousness is that which creates the entire thing.
It's the
and observes it.
It's like DOS.
It creates and observes. It creates and observes, and many more things. But Because I define consciousness as a reality that thinks. Therefore, the reality that creates the thoughts. And in this analogy, you cannot say that it is a computer that creates the output, right? It is, we have to agree that it is the entire
inputs, yeah.
internet. But what I just said is a metaphor. It's an image. It's a model. But the best way to answer this question is to, when a thought comes to you, to ask yourself, did I choose it? Where did that come from? You know? So sometimes we can see that it comes from a previous thought, but this previous thought is not you. Or you can see that these thoughts come from an input from your surroundings, but then it's not you. You see?
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, as consciousness, it is true that we create the thoughts. So the feeling I create, these thoughts are mine, is true, but not mine as this alleged separate entity. They are mine as this universal reality. So, if I say, I think, I should say, I reign.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll work on that. I'll try to rain tomorrow. I think I may rain tomorrow. Thank you.
I experience a lot of ecstatic states in you coming to a place like this. And I'm very glad that the emphasis here is on happiness because happiness is not an ecstatic state. It doesn't come and go like the states do. But I'm wondering, because as I experience these states, it becomes very clear to me that in regards to my illness, it's really like an overwhelming ecstatic state. And so I mean, there's not an attachment to them. They just come and go, and but I'm just wondering what to learn from them. There's nothing.
States are states. Whether ecstatic or not is irrelevant. States are states.
It does seem like there's a kind of crescendo to them, but and it doesn't risk overwhelming me now, which is
good. That's what was my concern.
Yeah, it's not, yeah. Yeah.
Good. The beauty is that inner peace is completely independent from the states.
I'm just curious. I mean, it's a question come up with the talking, but so is consciousness located in the body or outside the body, or is the body, or? And the question is, it's not in the brain, right? So it's not the thought. So
The body is located in consciousness. Consciousness is not located in the body.
So my question is, it's random, but so how does it hold say each person's a thought?
How?
Say each person hears a thought or consciousness, say, just for this question, how does it hold all my experience and memory in the brain, and yet consciously then I have these experiences where I break? Where's all that contained? Is it still in this? Is it just consciousness holding all that together universally, or?
If the human mind can remember and contain memories of the past, why would you deny a similar possibility to the reality that creates human minds? Similarly, if human minds seem to exhibit intelligence, how can we deny intelligence to the reality that creates human minds? You see? So whatever the human mind is able to do, to perform, God or reality is able to do much better, much more.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the process. Does it? Because from what I heard you say, it's a software program.
Why would this reality need a process to create? It's instantaneous.
I guess the question is based on just understanding what I am, just to help drop more illusion, just to have a clear understanding of. I guess you can't understand consciousness, but there's a part of me that is curious. I understand.
With the mind, you cannot understand consciousness.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But all that is required is to know that you are consciousness, and that, as such, your nature is different from the mind and from the objects of the world. We have the question is, what is it that is hearing these words right now? And we have been given by our parents simplistic and false, fake answers to this question. We have to understand the falsity of these answers. And we have to start from scratch. What do I know about me who is hearing these words? Why do I know about that which is hearing these words? From direct experience. Because other people don't know better. How could they? How could they know something that I couldn't possibly know? How could they have access to a different type of experience that I don't have? You see? I am fully equipped. I'm as well equipped as a PhD in neurology or neuroscience. They are not different, same consciousness. And so you are perfectly equipped to answer this question and also to deconstruct the fake answers that you were given. be open to this consciousness which is hearing these words is a different kind of animal altogether, different from the objects of the physical world, and different from the thoughts. That which thinks the thoughts, that which perceives the thoughts, is not a thought. But it is not either a table, because tables don't perceive. You see? So that, what is it that perceives? That's a good question. Matter doesn't perceive. Matter gets perceived, is perceived. So that which perceives is a different animal from anything which is perceived. That's the first thing. And because it is different, it doesn't have to be subjected to the same laws, to the same limitations. For instance, the law of being impermanent, of being born and disappearing, the law of having borders, being limited, having a given shape, etc. It is free. It is absolutely free from all of those limitations. So think of yourself as absolute freedom. Or think of yourself only as that which you know for certain to be. Everything you are not sure about yourself, don't entertain it. Stick to what you know for certain to be. And what you know for certain to be is whatever it is which is hearing these words right now. You know, because it's you. As I speak, it's you. It's not something else, somebody else. It's you. So you know for certain to be consciousness. The rest, it's a shift of reality from a pseudo-reality, a fake reality that we are being programmed with through our parents, education, culture, to an experiential reality. What I know to be from direct experience. And the more we stick to that, the more it reveals itself. You see? You have to stick to what we know to be. Right.